Sorry, I'm ready now. We're good. All right. Hi, my name is Kristen Stelgis. I'm the Community Preservation Act Manager for the City of Somerville. And tonight we're having a workshop for people who are interested for applying for Community Preservation Act funds for projects on public land. One of the reasons for having a special session on this topic is that the Community Preservation Committee requires that anyone who is applying for Community Preservation Act funding has the public entity, if they're applying for a project on public land, as a co-applicant. So just to talk through a little bit about what that means. The other thing that comes with doing a project on public land is the enabling legislation requires us to follow public procurement law, which if you're a community organization is maybe not something you've ever had to go through before. So talk a little bit about what that means for your project. But before we get into that, just want to say a little bit about what the Community Preservation Act is and what kinds of projects are eligible, because that's really where we start. So the Community Preservation Act is a state law. We only have it here in Massachusetts. And with communities that adopt this act, what you do is you take a surcharge on real estate property tax. In Somerville, that's 1.5%. That generates about $1.6 million a year. We get matched with funding from the state, and then the city can put in an optional appropriation. When all of those funding sources are combined, that means we have about $2 million a year for projects. Those projects are approved by the Board of Aldermen in the end, but the application process is primarily guided by and managed by the Community Preservation Committee, and they're the ones who make the recommendations for which projects to fund to the Board of Aldermen. So the kinds of projects that we can fund are dictated to us by the enabling legislation. So the first category that we can fund with Community Preservation Act funds is affordable housing, and this is around creating new units of affordable housing, and if you have created a unit with affordable housing, you can rehabilitate it with CPA funds. And we can also support affordable housing through things like rental assistance. In Somerville, the Somerville Affordable Housing Trust Fund is the affordable housing arm of the Community Preservation Act. So they actually manage a separate application process. The Community Preservation Committee, and so mostly what we'll talk about tonight, manages the application process for open space and recreation land and historic resources projects. CPA funds are primarily meant for capital improvements to spaces. So it can't be used to fund education, programming, maintenance, things like this. It's the idea of the act is really to take spaces that on the open space or recreation side are underutilized, could be better, and improve them, to also bring in new open space into Somerville. I think we know we have a Summer Vision goal of creating 125 new acres of open space in 30 years. It's a big task. CPA is one of the tools that we can use to acquire these parcels and turn them into great public spaces. On the historic side, we can use these funds to take our great historic spaces, bring them up to code, make them accessible, and make sure that they're in good repair, primarily on the exterior, so that they can last for future generations. CPA funds don't pay for things like carpeting or painting, kind of the maintenance things, and also if it's not a public building, not for the things that are inside. Like one example is that funds were used to pay for preserving a stained glass window on a historic home, but no money would be spent on the interior unless they decided to make their home a house museum, kind of like that. And so if you have particular questions, we can get into that more. And then if you, for the folks at home, are curious, if you go to our website, which is somervillema.gov/CPA, you'll see a matrix under the Apply for CPA Funding section that has a lot of information about what is and is not eligible. And I always encourage people when they have ideas for projects to come and talk to me so we can talk it through. One of the things, because we're following a law, it has very specific language with very specific definitions. So one of the first things to do is really understand when we say open space, what does that mean? And in CPA language, this is like green and wild space, where in Somerville, we tend to mean all of our park spaces. And so just kind of walking through some of the language and also talking through your project to make sure you really understand what is and is not eligible. For projects that are on, that you have an idea for that are on state land, we encourage you to contact the state entity directly to say, I have this idea, what do you think about it? If they're interested, is CPA a good source of funding for this, do you think? So that they sign on as a co-applicant. If you are if you have a property that you have in mind that might be a good space to do a project on, but you're not sure who the owner is, I encourage you to contact me and I can help you sort that out. Because it's not always clear who the owner is, particularly on, like McGrath, along McGrath, a lot of that is owned by the state. So sorting out, okay, well, what is state, what's not state along the Mystic, that's all state property. I'm really happy to talk that through with you. But for city land, because the city has a lot more control over what happens on city land, we are starting a new process this year. And this is for multiple reasons. One is that when the CPC asks for the city to be a co-applicant on projects that are proposed for city land, it's really because they want there to be a partnership between the city and the community organization or individual applying. And if you start that process too late, everybody feels very rushed, and it's very difficult to really jointly develop and own these ideas together. So we want to start the process a little bit earlier for those projects so there's more time to really sort this out together. The other is that there's a lot that's happening in this city. A lot of these kinds of projects are parks projects. We have 2 parks planners in the city, and they really want to make sure that they can be responsible partners on this project and not make you wait too long while they're trying to do other projects. So they look closely at the projects to make sure that they're able to commit the time and resources to make the project successful. And also just to make sure that the projects are in line with the neighborhood plans with Summer Vision, that they're feasible given procurement law and things like that. So what we're asking people to do is apply with a 2-page eligibility determination form. This form is available on the homepage of our website. There's also hard copies of it here tonight. So some of you may have seen it. So it's just some basic contact information, as well as you check which box your project or boxes your project fits in so that we know that it is indeed eligible for Community Preservation Act funding. And then you give a summary of what you're intending to do. And then on the back, the project status. So it's kind of describing why do we need this project in Somerville and what level of planning has already gone into this project. So this year, these applications are due by noon on Friday, August 4th. And you submit them to me. My contact information is on the page, but it's also, my email is kstelges@somervillema.gov. That's KSTELLJES@somervillema.gov. And what will happen is I will take this form and make sure that the project is indeed eligible. So if someone applies because they want money to offer classes, unfortunately that's not something we could pay for, or they want to do a public art mural, that's also not something that we can pay for. So, it would inform, this isn't eligible, maybe we can talk about ways to make something, turn it into an eligible project. But assuming that the project is eligible, would try to find, well, what is the right department to be your match? A lot of the projects come in this category, go to our Parks and Open Space department, but not all of them might go there. And so it's finding the right department that would be your partner. And then they review, and if you have the form, you see there are kind of 4 options for how they might decide to move forward with the project. And And somehow on your paper, sorry, they printed funny, but I can tell you it's also on the your guide to proposing a CPA project on city land, which is this one, which is also available on our website. So the department can agree this project is ready to go. We're ready to be a good partner on this. We're going to sign on as a co-applicant and we'll apply together. They could say maybe this is better in the time frame for next year. Let's continue to develop this idea together, but we don't think it's quite ready for to request funding in this year. The other thing is you may have an idea for a project that's already being captured by something that's about to start or is underway. So to make sure that you get connected into that process and make sure that you're aware and engaged in that. And the other thing is like this isn't possible at this time. And I know that the departments really want to help support as many projects as they can, but they also don't want to make people wait around for longer than they should, and have everyone be really excited, but it just not be something that they can take on. And you'll see when you talk particularly about the parks planners, we have Lincoln under construction, Winter Hills under construction, Hoyt Sullivan's under construction. We're about to kick off a design process for Prospect Hill Park. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things, but you can see for 2 people, just that I named is a lot of work. So it's really to help them be as good of a partner for you as they possibly can be. And so that's kind of the high level overview of what we're asking for and why. I think the last piece I just want to mention a little bit is around what it means to go through a procurement process following state procurement law. So state procurement law is designed to have transparent procurement processes and to make sure that there's no undue influence or collusion, that I'm not hiring my buddy, or we are not hiring people who give the mayor and the alderman a lot of campaign contributions, right? Is the main purpose. And then oftentimes CPA projects are broken into kind of multiple phases. So the first phase might be a design phase. We have a lot more flexibility in hiring who the designer is on public procurement processes, in part because I think that state law recognizes that it really matters that you get the right fit for the designer, because different designers bring different styles. And so if you just had to take the lowest bidder, you might get a style that you weren't particularly happy with, and it's difficult to get people to totally break out of their mold. But you do need to make sure that a design firm is hired that has the necessary skills to set you up for success for the next phase. And that's the public procurement process for construction. The state requires that we go with the lowest bidder on those projects. And that means that you need to be excruciatingly detailed in your bid specifications about what you want, because then you need to make sure that people are budgeting for that. And then we are getting someone who knows exactly what they're supposed to do, and they do exactly that. So that means at the design phase, you have to have someone who's a licensed landscape architect or a historic preservation professional who has the necessary licenses and skills to be able to set you up well for the procurement process. So I'm going to stop now and take any questions. Bob, before you leave, do you have any final questions? I know you have to go.
No, you did answer my question about the co-applicant.
Okay.
So it sounds as though DCR theoretically would be a co-applicant.
If you're talking about Draw 7 in particular.
Draw 7 or Foss Park.
That's right.
I think ultimately then the CPA would become a co-applicant as well.
So the CPA is the funding source.
Right.
So depending on the relationship, because the city works closely with DCR on both Draw 7 and Foss Park, the city will probably be involved in there somewhere, but technically you must have DCR as a co-applicant. Mystic River Watershed Association just got them as a co-applicant on a project last year for the Blessing of the Bay Boathouse Park design, so there is a precedent for that in Somerville. But you would need, when you apply, and so you don't have to meet the August 4th deadline because that's just for city projects, city land projects. You have the September deadline, but if I would encourage you to, communicate early and then, engage the city as well. So if DCR is looking favorable, then we should be talking with our recreation department, with our parks planners, so that everybody's in the loop and that we're all collaborating. But your technical co-applicant is DCR because they're the ones who own the land.
And I would assume the precedent of the Blessing of the Bay boathouse, that's information that I can get.
You want to see their application? Yeah, it's online. So if you go to the /CPA and the city's website, it's under 2017. So you'll see the application there and their eligibility determination form, maybe. But at least their application and their presentation is up there. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, are there any other questions that you have about anything I presented? If there's nothing kind of general and people want to get into more specifics of their particular needs, we can go there. But Jessica, I also want to offer you, if you would like to say anything from a perspective of a committee member.
Thanks. Okay. So I know that you define open space, but can you just tell me, is there any, you were saying that Somerville defines it quite differently than other areas. Are we allowed to define it broadly? And are we really just talking about parks or any outdoor areas? How broad can that get?
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it to clarify. So the open space category includes open space and recreation land. So by that I mean technically our parks are considered in CPA language recreation land and not open space. But I think the main thing to think about in terms of open space, we're very different than other communities. A lot of our open spaces are very small. We're not looking at hundreds of acres, and that's okay. But we want to do a project that's at the level of capital improvements and not just landscaping. So things like planting more street trees or planting flowers in a median don't quite rise up to that level of a capital improvement. So that's more the line that we worry about. So it doesn't just have to be parks because it can be for passive recreation. So it could be just a space that people are able to come and enjoy being outside.
Okay. Yeah, I'll ask you more specifics about the ideas we have, but